Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Hannah, and I have this is the fourth of my YouTube recordings so far. I'm just starting this channel, and this is more of a physiology lecture about cortisol, which is an extremely complex hormone in the body, and it's highly misunderstood and feared by the majority of people. Before I start, I would like to thank you for listening to me, and I would like to stress out that it takes me time to search this information and provide it for you. It's based on scientific evidence. I ask you please to uh, share your comments with me, your feedback, to subscribe, and to like the YouTube, and also share it with your colleagues and your friends so the information will be spread around and to the majority of people as many as possible. So this is an introductory lecture or PowerPoint. It's not going to cover too much, but I'm going to really tackle cortisol from a different way, from a different perspective. I'm going to go to the core and tell you what cortisol really is. To the majority of people, this is the best description of cortisol. It's often associated with a chemical made in the body. It's a hormone, and it's highly feared. It's regarded as has got many bad names, including the death hormone, the road rage hormone, and the stress hormone. Now, all of the names I give you could be potentially be a consequence of cortisol if it's being overproduced or not properly used. But what cortisol is really is extremely complex, life-sustaining, very important for life hormone. It is, in fact, the most complex and the most critical for life of all endocrine hormones. It's even more critical for life than insulin, which is also highly regarded and also feared by the majority of the public. So I would like to start this PowerPoint with the slide from this image is from NASA. The images I put on my YouTube are all taken from credited websites, and I put the website or the links accordingly because I don't make them, so I have to put unless I make the image, and I'll put my name in it. So this is a space shuttle. Obviously, it's going to the space, and you notice a lot of energy required for the release of this shuttle. The same, I could also compare cortisol with an airplane when it starts, when basically when it leaves the ground. The airplane burns a lot of fuel in order to go from ground zero to the sky. So how could cortisol be linked to this? How is cortisol associated with these powerful instrument or powerful machineries? I could let you pause for a minute or two to think. If you are involved in science, physiology, medical, or nursing, or other related topics, you probably would come to the answer. But I'm going to explain it to you how cortisol is into our body is what literally linked to this picture. This is a very complex graph. I'm going to make it easy for you, I promise. This is how cortisol 24-hour graph. It's called circadian rhythm of cortisol, and I took it from a medical literature, which the link is mentioned. Now, cortisol is also used as a drug to treat lots of medical conditions and also to treat adrenal insufficiency known as Addison disease, which I will touch base on it. So why am I mentioning this graph? Is that if you notice the pick up, the waking up, when we wake up at around 8 a.m. in the morning, cortisol spikes. The adrenal glands are obviously, cortisol is made by the adrenal glands, which are glands situated on the top of the kidneys. They're very small, but very mighty glands. And they look like a triangle. I will show you the picture of the adrenal glands in the following slides. When we wake up, the adrenal gland, before waking up, literally send a lot of cortisol to the blood. And cortisol is very critical for that moment, for waking up. It primes our body for the day. It primes our body for stress. Waking up is a form of stress. And going back to the history of caveman, the history of our ancestors, waking up is not something that you have to deal with lightly. You have to go and gather your food, defend your tribe. There could be an animal waiting for you outside, or go and hunt for an animal, or live in the forest, or whatever. So you are in danger 24/7. And cortisol walks you through that danger by optimizing every system in your body to manage the stress. Now, I'll talk about this more later, but if you notice that cortisol begins to drop in the middle of the day and goes up a little bit more in the evening, dropping the level of cortisol in the early afternoon is responsible for the fatigue that many people endure, which is often resolved by taking a short nap or siesta. So basically, one reason that some people take more siesta than others is that their cortisol drops a little bit faster. And it goes up. And this is all normal. There's nothing abnormal in this graph. Now, if you notice here, at night, cortisol goes down below a plateau, never goes to zero. Cortisol cannot reach zero level at the blood, because if your cortisol level is zero, you die. You cannot live without cortisol, and I'll explain to you why. And obviously, when we sleep, we don't need a lot of stress management, and that's why the optimal level of cortisol during sleep, when the sun goes down, is low, but always present in our system. So here's another hormone that cortisol, in fact, the two hormones are at odd, or are at inverse to each other. If you notice that cortisol goes up during the day slightly and goes down, this is a little bit acute, but it's slower than this, goes to a plateau, low level at sleep, and around 10 p.m., basically 10 p.m. or sunset, whichever comes first. Obviously, back in the days, sunrise would be around 6 or 7 a.m., sunset would be around 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., depending on whether it's summer or winter, could be even 5 p.m., and people would go to sleep early. Melatonin, which is the sleep hormone made in the pineal gland in the brain, peaks up during that time. And the two hormones regulate what we call the circadian rhythm. They're very important hormones. So during the day, you are basically run your engine. Every machinery in your body is affected by cortisol and cannot be optimized. One way to describe cortisol is it optimizes every system in your body to the maximum possible beneficial outcome for stress management. So this is the adrenal glands in yellow, and they look like a pyramid, very small, the size of the walnut. There are two of them, and they are situated on the top of kidneys. They are often neglected in public, and in fact, many people never heard of them. They are, in fact, the most important and the most complex of all endocrine glands. And the hormones that they make are absolutely critical and indispensable for life. Cortisol is regulated, let me back up here, sorry. Cortisol is regulated by the brain, by the hypothalamus. This is more anatomical and physiological slide. You don't need to know what CRH or ACTH are unless you are in physiology or biology or medical related field. But these are hormones made in the brain and the pituitary gland, and they regulate the release of cortisol. And obviously, when cortisol is released, they send a message to the brain to slow down. It's called negative. So they put a brake on the brain. The more cortisol is made, the more brake sent, they call it negative feedback. So it sent back a message to the brain, stop making these hormones. We are happy, we are making enough cortisol, so the pituitary and the brain will make less of CRH and ACTH. Another stress hormone that is involved, and I'm sure you all heard of it, it's adrenaline, and it always takes the show. Adrenaline is the shiny than cortisol, although I will show you by the end of this presentation that you cannot make adrenaline unless you have cortisol. Adrenaline synthesis, which is also made in the adrenal, in the internal part called the medulla of the adrenal, requires cortisol. Without cortisol, you cannot synthesize adrenaline. This is how important cortisol is. The other difference is adrenaline is fast and cannot last long. Why? Because adrenaline is responsible for speeding up your heart, for raising your blood pressure significantly, and for preparing you for immediate runaway. This is called fight or flight. You're basically running away from the tiger. Now, if you keep running away from the tiger, you're going to die. If you fight the tiger, you either kill the tiger or the tiger will kill you. It's no other way. So that cannot last for more than few minutes, perhaps 15, 20 minutes, maximum an hour. And then your heart has to slow down. Cortisol takes over. Cortisol is long effect, long term, and more durable than adrenaline. So the two hormones work in harmony. While adrenaline is fast, cortisol is slow. Another important fact about cortisol is blood glucose, and that gives the name of cortisol a famous physiological name called glucocorticoid, because it's a major hormone in the body that regulates blood glucose. When we eat a high-carb diet, notably sugary food, we cause our blood sugar to spike, which will lead to the spike of the hormone insulin, which I will talk about in the future. And subsequently, insulin spike will lead to the spike of cortisol because insulin causes our plasma glucose to go down. Now, what's the problem with that? If you have too much insulin, your plasma glucose level could go down quickly, and you could end up you could even faint. I mean, literally, an extreme high dose of insulin can send you into a shock. You end up on the floor. It can also cause a brain damage. So cortisol is there to protect the body from excess insulin, not to antagonize insulin. Most people think that cortisol main function is to block insulin. That is abnormal. When cortisol blocks insulin, this is a condition called insulin resistance. Well, we'll talk about it, and there's also cortisol resistance. So these are very complex hormones, very linked, and very important for life. Well, I stress out that cortisol is the number one hormone that is the most complex, important hormone and most critical for life. Insulin is the number two hormone and the second most important and critical for life of all endocrine hormones. Cortisol comes from cholesterol. People who, individuals who think that cholesterol is bad think twice. And you see, obviously, you don't need to know any of these terms, but this is cholesterol. You see also the sex hormones are made here, but I'm not going to cover that. This is in the middle. This is the adrenal route. And these three hormones, aldosterone, cortisol, and cortisone, are the hormones that run the show. Aldosterone regulates electrolytes. Cortisol regulates everything, including electrolytes. So cortisol can also regulate electrolytes. However, the kidneys converts cortisol into cortisone, which is an oxidized form of the hormone. Now you know there is what is cortisone is. It's also a hormone. It's a weaker form. The reason that the kidneys convert cortisol to cortisone is because aldosterone work on the kidneys. If that cortisol does not convert to cortisone in the kidneys and your cortisol keeps right in the kidneys, you could have excess sodium and hypertensive crisis. So nature selected aldosterone to take care of sodium and potassium in the kidneys, while cortisol runs the show everywhere else. However, when everything collapses, when the adrenals are removed, when the person goes into a stage of shock, which I will talk about at the end, it's only cortisol or hydro-cortisone, that's another name for it, that will save their life, not aldosterone. When that's called adrenal crisis, acute adrenal crisis, of which basically cortisol drops almost to zero and the person drops on the floor. Unless a hydrocortisone or cortisol injection is given, the person will die within probably 1 to 2 hours or less. It's very vital. It's even adrenal crisis can kill the person faster than kidney failure. It can kill the person within an hour or 2 hours. So, historically, cortisol is linked to this physician. His name is Thomas Edison. He's a British physician, and he was the first who diagnosed adrenal insufficiency, which I will not talk about here. This is not a medical lecture. This is our presentation. This is a more physiology presentation. This is how vital cortisol is. This is a medical plaque that when someone is under treatment for adrenal insufficiency, which require two forms of the hormone to remain alive, hydrocortisone and pleotropic. You don't need to know the other one. That's aldosterone, basically. They get a synthetic form of the hormone cortisone or cortisol called pleotropic. And the plaque will indicate that anyone who has adrenal insufficiency must carry an IV or IM injection of hydrocortisone or cortisol. And once there is any suspicion of adrenal crisis, an injection must be given immediately. Again, I'm not giving you any medical advice. If you are taking corticosteroids, another form of cortisol is synthetic form, basically synthetic hormones like prednisone and dexamethasone. Those are very common drugs, and they are highly feared because they have lots of side effects. And you must follow with your medical doctor. This is not a medical advice. If you are under treatment for Addison disease or adrenal insufficiency and or treatment for Cushing syndrome, I will not talk about Cushing syndrome in this presentation. It's the opposite. It's excess cortisol. You must follow strictly with your own health care provider. Cortisol is also linked to a very important person, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who has been diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency, and he is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, survivor of this deadly disease. Thanks to the isolation, the systemic isolation of cortisol done by those scientists, and they won the Nobel Prize in 1950, Mayo Clinic. Now, here's something interesting about cortisol. While adrenal insufficiency or Addison disease is extremely rare, even if you are a medical professional and you practice it, I do have a degree. I am an MD, but I am not practicing. I have done some residency in the past and I switched to teaching. I am more of a professor. I teach biology, anatomy, physiology, nutrition, and other courses. And I don't practice medicine. I enjoy teaching and I'm happy with it. And I enjoy lecturing and broadcasting. Um, those scientists isolated cortisone for another condition. Surprise. They found out, and that is also going to be mentioned here at the end, that cortisol is the major hormone that regulates inflammation. It's basically the most potent anti-inflammatory chemical in the body. So think of cortisol as a super aspirin. In fact, many people think of the cortisol as a painkiller. Yes, it does suppress pain because it's part of inflammation, but it's not an antibiotic. This is what really I hear from people that, oh, cortisol is antibiotic. No, it is a hormone. Okay. The medical condition that was treated successfully with cortisol was not only Addison disease, it was more common crippling inflammatory condition called rheumatoid arthritis. It's an autoimmune disease. And subsequently, they came out to understand that autoimmune disease are linked to cortisol resistance, which explain why numerous medical conditions, including asthma, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, lupus, and multiple sclerosis, and lots of other obscure diseases are treated with synthetic form of the hormone. So where does this all come from? Where does it start? I pick up the slide from Williams' textbook of physiology, a very interesting textbook. And it's published by Elsevier, so the link is there, the publisher. So I'm going, obviously you don't need to know, I have to show you in order to make you believe. At birth, when the baby exits his mom, the baby needs to open his lung to breathe normal oxygen instead of breathing through the placenta. So let's start even from the lung. In order for your lung to open up and to make enough surfactant, you are required to have cortisol. In order to have optimal breathing, you are required to have cortisol because cortisol not only suppresses inflammation in the lung, it also optimizes another system, which is the sympathetic nervous system. These are the two stress systems. The catecholamines, basically adrenaline, noradrenaline, commonly named are the chemicals or the hormones / neurotransmitters associated with the sympathetic nervous system, the fight and flight system. Cortisol is associated with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. If you remember, I showed you a slide of the brain, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal. They both work in concert, and they require each other. Cortisol is required for lung, for breathing. If you have asthma and you take an inhaler, the inhaler will often have drugs, synthetic form of the hormone cortisol, and synthetic form of catecholamine enhancer called beta agonist, which enhance your lungs capacity and reduce inflammation. Now, the cortisol is also required for optimal heart and cardiovascular blood pressure. It not only regulates sodium and potassium, which are extremely vital to keep your sodium level at certain level, otherwise your blood pressure will drop and you die. And also, it's essential to optimize your blood pressure. So now you know that blood pressure linked to cortisol and to catecholamines. If you don't have cortisol, your blood pressure goes down and you drop on the floor. Literally. If you have too much cortisol, you could have high blood pressure, and that's why cortisol have a bad name. Well, too much of anything can be bad, even oxygen. Cortisol is involved in what we call gluconeogenesis. If you go back to my carbohydrate and protein slides from a former YouTube, in order to maintain plasma glucose, if you are fasting, if you don't eat any carbohydrate, amino acids in the muscles will begin to convert to glucose to maintain glucose for the survival of the brain. This is one of the vital functions of cortisol. It also is required for adequate and optimal function of pancreatic hormones. It involves in synthesis of in insulin and glucagon. So glucagon, which is required for acute hypoglycemia, you cannot have adequate glucagon response without these systems, without catecholamines and without cortisol. So cortisol complexity is not only a hormone, it interferes, it regulates other hormones. Here's another one, T3 and T4, thyroid hormone thyroxine, which is the weaker form of the thyroid hormone, like cortisol and cortisone, or like adrenaline and noradrenaline, also commonly other names, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Thyroid hormones exist in two forms. The weaker form called T4, thyroxine, and the active form called T3 or triiodothyronine. In order to make adequate and active form of thyroid hormones, you must have cortisol. So what does the thyroid gland do? It regulates our metabolic rate. Well, that's part of the stress response. If you are running away from a tiger, you need to have enough metabolism. You need to have enough thyroid function. So contrary to public view, cortisol does not suppress the thyroid. It's very vital for the thyroid. Too much of it, however, will suppress the thyroid. Too much of anything will cause adverse effect. Cortisol, if you go to this one here, I know it's tiny. It's required for conversion of NE norepinephrine to epinephrine. This is well established. Epinephrine, adrenaline, is a hormone made in the center of the adrenal. You cannot make adrenaline without cortisol. So contrary to public belief that cortisol is little adrenaline, I could say that adrenaline is little cortisol, or noradrenaline is vital. That you cannot live. Noradrenaline is in all synapses. The end synapses of the sympathetic nervous system use the neurotransmitter noradrenaline. Adrenaline requires cortisol to be released and to be fully active. Also, to have an adequate effect of noradrenaline or norepinephrine on blood pressure and toning of blood arteries, you must have cortisol. Cortisol is involved in fat, brown fatty tissue, that's the end thermogenesis, again, they work in concert with the catecholamine system. The two systems really are non-separable, inseparable, and indispensable. There's one more thing that I will talk about is inflammation, which is not in this slide. When you are basically your body fighting foreign object, bacteria, virus, or any case of it will create what we call inflammation. I won't discuss that in detail, but cortisol and catecholamines are extremely important in making our immune system work properly. Again, contrary to belief, the immune system will not defend the body without proper presence of these two chemicals. And too much of them or too little of them will cause the immune system either to collapse and you have infections and you could die from that, or the immune system becomes overactive and start attacking the bodies, and this is called autoimmunity. Also, allergic reactions, another example. For example, if you have a bee sting, or you get stung or bitten by an animal or an insect. Cortisol is immediately released to suppress the swelling and the pain and the redness of that area. And you know that cortisol and epinephrine are used to treat inflammation. EpiPen is adrenaline used in anaphylactic shock. Cortisol creams, such as hydro-cortisone creams, famously sold in pharmacies, are used to treat a lot of skin and other allergic reactions, and as you know. So to summarize this, cortisol is very vital. It's required for stress regulation. Talk about stress for inflammation and immune response. Very, very critical. It's required for metabolism. More than glucose, it's also involved in lipids, fat, and protein metabolism. It's also involved in minerals like calcium and other minerals in the body. It's will that will be covered in different. I'm gonna do several lectures about this hormone and insulin to due to the complexity and to the large amount of misconceptions and misunderstandings. Cortisol is absolutely required for optimal function of thyroid hormones and for synthesis of adrenaline. Cortisol has very complex and very essential and vital effect on the heart and arterial blood pressure, small arteries, maintaining your blood pressure toning. So remember the hormone that spikes up your blood sugar and blood pressure, and that's why people hate it. If you lack this hormone, your blood pressure and blood sugar will drop down. So is sodium. You drop down, your sodium will drop down. And you end up in a condition called adrenal crisis, which require immediate injection of cortisol in order to pay the person to remain alive. Without cortisol, the person will die from adrenal crisis, and I talked about it before. Cortisol is the most pleiotropic. The word pleiotropic means multifaceted or many effects. It affects every system in the human body. No system is spared. It's the most complex of all endocrine hormones. Unfortunately, it's also the most feared and the most misexplained and misunderstood. So what cortisol is, if I remember the first slide, that scary look, this is what cortisol is actually. It is a hormone that is obviously involved in our genes. All hormones affect or alter our gene expression. It's a hormone that's, I just put the bird, and it's a slide that's taken from the internet. And basically, it's the slide shows a kind of harmony, life, survival, nature, happiness. You really, in order to survive, in order to combat your day-to-day stress, your day-to-day pain, your day-to-day, and in order to remain active, to maintain your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your mood, your happiness, you name it, you must have adequate and functional level of this very critical hormone. Thank you very much. I hope that this is been helpful, and I end up here. Again, I ask you please to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And I will be making more YouTubes in the future. Thank you.